The arrow was already in flight when Sarah saw it. She'd spent the last hour pressed against the market square's stone wall, trying to stay invisible while the Alpha King gave his speech. But her eyes caught the glint of metal arcing through the autumn air. Death whistling toward the king's heart. She didn't think. Thinking was for people who had futures, people who had something to lose. Sarah had neither. She lunged sideways, arms outstretched, and felt the impact like a fist to her chest. The arrow punched through her sternum with a wet, decisive sound. So this is what dying feels like, she thought distantly. Not the searing agony she'd expected. Just cold, cold spreading from the wound outward, turning her blood to frost, her bones to brittle ice. The cursed arrow sent tendrils of black magic crawling through her veins like living shadows. She was on the ground. The cobblestones were slick with something dark and wet. Her blood. Hard to tell with her vision graying at the edges. Above her, chaos erupted. Screaming, guards shouting orders. Boots pounding stone. But it all felt far away, like she was hearing it through water. Someone was kneeling beside her. Large hands pressed against her chest, trying to hold her together when she could feel herself coming apart from the inside. "Stay with me." The voice was rough, commanding. She'd heard it from a distance all afternoon, the Alpha King addressing his people. Now, up close, he sounded almost desperate. "Don't close your eyes." Sarah tried to focus on his face. Strong features, sharp jaw, eyes that burned amber even in human form. He looked furious. Kings probably didn't like when random women ruined their speeches by bleeding out on their watch. "I don't even know your name," he said, and there was something raw in his voice that didn't make sense. "That's the point," she wanted to tell him. "Nobody does." Her lips moved, but nothing came out. The cold was in her throat now, climbing higher. She could feel the curse burrowing deeper, wrapping around her heart like a fist slowly clenching shut. The king's face blurred. The shouting faded. Darkness pulled her under. The first thing Sarah felt was warmth, not the cold that had consumed her as she died. And she had died, she was certain of it. She'd felt her heart stutter and stop. But this was different. This was heat against her skin, like lying in sunlight after a lifetime in shadow. The second thing she felt was pain. It radiated from her chest in dull, persistent waves. Not the white-hot agony of the arrow, but something deeper. Bone deep, like her entire body had been torn apart and stitched back together by someone who wasn't entirely sure how the pieces fit. "Don't." The voice was low, rough with exhaustion. "You'll tear the healing." Sarah forced her eyes open. The room swam into focus slowly. High ceilings, stone walls, a massive fireplace crackling with flames that cast dancing shadows across dark wood furniture. This wasn't a healer's ward. This was someone's private chamber. And sitting in a chair beside the bed, looking like he hadn't slept in days, was Alpha King Theron Kane. Sarah's heart kicked against her ribs. She tried to sit up, failed, and settled for turning her head. He looked worse than she felt. Shirt half unbuttoned and stained with what might have been blood. Dark circles under his eyes. Hair disheveled like he'd been running his hands through it for hours. "You're awake," he said flatly. Not a question. Not even particularly relieved. Just stating a fact. "I'm alive," Sarah corrected, her voice coming out as a rasp. Her throat felt like she'd swallowed broken glass. "For now." Theron leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and fixed her with those unsettling amber eyes. The arrow was cursed. Dark magic, the kind that doesn't let go once it's in you. The healers couldn't remove it without killing you, and leaving it in was killing you slower. Sarah processed this. "So what did you do?" His jaw tightened. "Something I shouldn't have," Before she could ask what that meant, he stood abruptly and moved to a side table where a pitcher of water sat. He poured a glass and brought it to her, his movement stiff, controlled. When he held it to her lips, his hands were steady, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. The water hurt going down, but God, it was the best thing she'd ever tasted. The curse was tied to your life force, Theron said as he set the glass aside. It was feeding on you, using your energy to sustain itself. The healers said the only way to fight it was to give you more life force than it could consume. Understanding dawned slowly. Horribly, you bonded with me. I marked you, he corrected, voice careful. It's not a full bond, not like true mates, but it created a connection strong enough to share my life force with you, strong enough to keep you alive while your body fought off the curse. Sarah's hand moved instinctively to her neck. Her fingers found raised skin, a bite mark, still tender, that sent a shiver down her spine when she touched it. The mark of an alpha. The mark that meant she belonged to him in the eyes of every shifter who saw it. You should have let me die, she said quietly. Theron's head snapped toward her, something dangerous flashing in his eyes. You threw yourself in front of a cursed arrow meant for me. I wasn't going to let you die for that. I'm nobody, Sarah said, and it wasn't self-pity, just fact. This is a bad trade for you. That's not your decision to make. The sharp edge in his voice surprised her. She looked at him more carefully. He was furious, she realized. Not at her exactly, but at something, at the situation, at the choice he'd been forced to make. How long was I unconscious? 4 days. 4 days of her lying here in his bed. And it was his bed. She was certain now, taking in the masculine furnishings, the weapons mounted on the walls, the faint scent of cedar and smoke that clung to the sheets. 4 days of him keeping vigil while the court probably lost their minds. They know, don't they? Sarah said. About the mark. Everyone knows. Theron moved back to his chair. You've been the primary topic of conversation in court for 4 days. The wolfless woman who saved the king's life. The nobody he marked. The way he said nobody stung more than the wound in her chest. Not because he was cruel about it, his tone was perfectly neutral, but because it was true. I should leave, Sarah said. As soon as I can walk, I'll go. You can't, Theron cut her off. The mark creates a bond. Incomplete, artificial, but functional. Separation will be painful for both of us until the curse fully leaves your system. And according to the healers, that could take weeks, maybe months. Sarah stared at him. You're saying I'm stuck here? I'm saying we're stuck with each other. He met her eyes, and for the first time she saw the exhaustion there, the weight of it. I'm not happy about this either, but we don't have a choice. The words shouldn't have hurt. They were practical, honest. But something in Sarah's chest twisted anyway. I'm sorry, she said quietly, looking away, for putting you in this position. I wasn't thinking. I saw the arrow and I moved. Why? The question caught her off guard. What? Why did you move? Theron leaned forward, studying her face with intensity that made her want to squirm. You don't know me. I've done nothing for you. You're not Pack. You're not bound to me by loyalty or law. So why risk your life for a king you've never met? Sarah opened her mouth, then closed it. How could she explain that she'd spent her entire life watching people matter, watching them be important and valued and seen, while she existed in the margins? How could she tell him that in that split second she'd made a calculation? His life was worth something, and hers wasn't? I don't know, she lied. Instinct, I guess. Theron's eyes narrowed. He didn't believe her, but he didn't push. I'll have food sent up, he said, standing. You need to eat. Rebuild your strength. A healer will check on you this evening. He paused with his hand on the door handle. There are clothes in the wardrobe. You'll stay here until you're well enough to move to your own quarters. Your own quarters. Not guest quarters. Not rooms in the servants' wing. She was being given status then. Position. Because he'd marked her, and now she couldn't be invisible anymore, even if she wanted to be. Thank you, Sarah said, because she didn't know what else to say. Your Majesty? Something flickered across his face. Irritation, maybe, or discomfort. Theron, he said. If you're wearing my mark, you can use my name. Then he was gone, the door closing behind him with a soft click that felt far too final. Sarah lay back against the silk pillows and stared at the canopy above the bed. Her whole body ached. The mark on her neck throbbed in time with her heartbeat, and somewhere in the back of her mind she could feel something else. Something new, strange, and unwelcome. Him. Not his thoughts exactly, but his presence. Like a second heartbeat layered beneath her own. She could sense his exhaustion, his frustration, the tight control he kept on emotions she couldn't quite name. The bond. This was what he'd meant by connection. Sarah closed her eyes and tried not to think about how badly she'd just complicated both their lives. Tried not to remember the feel of his hands pressing against her wound, trying to hold her together. Tried not to wonder why a king would spend 4 days keeping vigil over a woman who was, by all accounts, nobody worth saving. By the 3rd day after waking, Sarah could walk across the room without feeling like she'd collapse. The wound in her chest had faded to a dull ache. The mark on her neck had stopped throbbing constantly, settling into a strange warmth she was learning to ignore. Theron visited twice a day, morning and evening, like clockwork. He never stayed long. Just checked that she had everything she needed, that the healers were satisfied with her progress. His manner was perfectly polite, perfectly distant, like she was a responsibility he was managing. Nothing more. It shouldn't have bothered her. But the bond made it harder to maintain that distance. Every time he entered the room, she felt his presence like a physical touch. And worse, she could sense the things he was trying to hide, the concern beneath the cool exterior, the guilt he wouldn't voice, the weight of his crown. On the 4th day, he found her standing by the window, looking out over the castle grounds. She'd finally put on the clothes he'd mentioned, a shirt that hung to her knees and pants she'd had to tie with a belt. She felt ridiculous, but it was better than wearing the blood-stained remains of what she'd died in. "You're up," Theron said from the doorway. Sarah turned. He looked better than that first day, cleaner, at least, like he'd finally slept. But the tension in his shoulders was still there, the careful control that never slipped. "I'm sick of lying down," she said. "And the healer said movement would help." He nodded, moving into the room. "How's the pain?" "Manageable." Sarah turned back to the window. "When can I leave?" She felt his surprise through the bond before he masked it. "Leave these chambers? I assume I'm not supposed to live in your bedroom permanently. Right?" There was something strange in his voice. "I've had rooms prepared for you in the East Wing. You can move whenever you're ready." "I'm ready now." Theron was quiet for a moment. "The bond doesn't require us to be in the same room." "No," Sarah said quietly. "But we both know this isn't a real bond. You don't have to pretend it is." Something flashed in his eyes. Anger, maybe, or frustration. The bond crackled between them, and for a moment she felt the full force of his emotions. The guilt, the resentment, the irritation. And underneath it all, something that felt uncomfortably like hurt. "You're right," he said, voice carefully neutral. "It's not a real bond. I'll have your things moved to the East Wing today." He left before she could respond. Sarah stood by the window and hated herself a little. He'd been trying to help, in his own stiff, duty-bound way, and she'd thrown it back in his face. Through the bond, she felt him moving through the castle. Felt the moment his anger shifted to resignation, then to that bone-deep exhaustion she was becoming familiar with. She wondered if this was how it would be between them, forever careful, forever distant, bound together but never truly connected. It felt like another kind of death, slower but no less final than the arrow. The rooms in the East Wing were beautiful, spacious and well-appointed, with views of the mountains, but they felt empty, cold. Sarah unpacked the few belongings she had and tried not to think about how the bed was too big, how the silence pressed against her ears, how she could still feel Theron somewhere in the castle through the bond, distant now, muted, but still there. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. A woman stood in the hallway, tall, elegant, with dark hair and sharp green eyes that assessed Sarah in a single glance. "So you're the one," the woman said, stepping inside without invitation. "The wolfless girl who threw herself in front of an arrow." Sarah's spine straightened. "And you are?" "Lyanna Ashford, the king's cousin." She circled Sarah slowly, like a predator evaluating prey. "Which means I'm one of the few people in this castle who can speak plainly with you." "Then speak plainly." Lyanna's lips curved. "You're causing quite the stir. The court is divided. Half think you're incredibly brave, the other half think you're a calculated opportunist who manipulated the king into marking you." "I didn't ask for this." "No, but you have it now." Lyanna stopped in front of her. "That mark on your neck? It makes you a target. Everyone who wants to hurt Theron now has a convenient weakness to exploit." The word echoed what Theron had said. Weakness. "Is that what I am to him?" Sarah asked quietly. Lyanna's expression softened slightly. "That's what you could become, if his enemies have their way. But here's what you need to understand. Theron doesn't mark people lightly. He doesn't save people he doesn't think are worth saving. The fact that he's kept you alive, that he's given you status and protection, that means something. Or it means he's noble and felt obligated. My cousin is many things, but he's not sentimental about obligations." Lyanna moved toward the door. "He's been alone since his parents died 3 years ago. Hasn't let anyone close. Hasn't trusted anyone enough to show weakness. And then you come along and throw yourself in front of a cursed arrow for him, and suddenly he's spending 4 days at your bedside refusing to leave." She paused in the doorway. "That's not obligation. That's something else entirely." After Lyanna left, Sarah sat on the edge of her too-big bed and touched the mark on her neck. Through the bond, she could feel Theron, a constant presence at the edge of her awareness. And beneath his careful control, she sensed something that might have been loneliness. Maybe they weren't so different after all. The assassination attempt came 2 days later. Sarah was in the gardens when she felt it, a wrongness that crawled up her spine and made her wolf instincts scream, even though she'd never had a wolf to begin with. Through the bond, she felt Theron. He was in the training yard, and someone was watching him with murderous intent. Sarah was running before she could think, her healing chest protesting with each step. She burst into the training yard just as a servant approached Theron with a cup of wine. "Don't drink that!" Her voice cut across the yard. Every head turned. Theron's hand froze halfway to the cup. The servant's eyes widened, and he bolted. Theron's guards tackled him before he'd made it 5 steps. Theron crossed to Sarah in 3 long strides, his hands gripping her shoulders. "How did you know?" "I felt it." Sarah pressed a hand to her chest, trying to catch her breath. "Through the bond, something was wrong. I just knew." His amber eyes studied her face with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You sensed danger through the bond." "I guess so." His captain, Roland, approached with the wine cup carefully wrapped. "We'll have this tested, Your Majesty, but if Lady Sarah's instincts are correct—" "They are," Theron said, not taking his eyes off Sarah. "Get me answers. Who hired him, and how many more are out there?" After Roland left, Theron's hands were still on her shoulders. "That was reckless. You're still healing. If there had been multiple assassins, then you'd be dead from poisoned wine." Sarah met his gaze. I'm not going to apologize for saving your life. Again. Something flickered in his eyes, frustration mixed with something warmer. You can't keep throwing yourself into danger for me. Why not? You tore apart your life to save mine. That's different. How? He opened his mouth, closed it. Through the bond, she felt his emotions churning, fear for her safety, anger at himself, and underneath it all, something he was fighting not to acknowledge. Come with me, he said finally. He led her back to his chambers, not hers in the East Wing, but his. The place where she'd woken up 4 days ago, wearing his mark. Once inside, he rounded on her. You could have been killed today. Do you understand that? If there had been more than one assassin, if they'd targeted you instead of me. Why would they target me? I'm nobody. You're wearing my mark. The words came out rougher than he probably intended. That makes you mine in the eyes of every shifter in this kingdom. That makes you a target for everyone who wants to hurt me. Mine. The word hung in the air between them. I didn't ask for this, Sarah said quietly. I didn't ask to be marked. I didn't ask to be important to anyone. I was fine being invisible. Well, you're not invisible anymore. Theron's hands clenched at his sides. You saved my life. Twice now. And I... He stopped, jaw tightening. You what? I can't lose you. The confession seemed torn from him. The bond. It's supposed to be artificial, temporary. But every day it gets stronger. Every day I feel you more clearly. And the thought of something happening to you. He didn't finish. He didn't need to. Through the bond, Sarah felt everything he wasn't saying. The fear, the need, the desperate, terrifying realization that she'd become important to him. I feel it too, she whispered. The bond. It's not artificial anymore, is it? No. Theron moved closer, his hand coming up to cup her face. I don't know when it changed, but it's real now. You're real. And Sarah rose on her toes and kissed him, cutting off whatever he'd been about to say. The bond flared between them like fire, bright and consuming and undeniable. Theron's arms came around her, pulling her closer, and through the connection she felt everything. His relief, his want, his fear of losing her. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. Stay with me tonight, he said quietly. Not in the East Wing. Here. Theron, I need to know you're safe. The bond is stronger here. I can protect you better here. Sarah studied his face, the sharp angles, the amber eyes that burned with something that looked like desperation. This isn't about the bond, is it? No. His thumb traced her cheekbone. It's about you. It's about the fact that I can't remember what it felt like before you existed in my life, and I don't want to find out what it feels like to lose you. Then I'll stay, Sarah said simply. Relief flooded through him, through both of them via the bond. That night, Sarah fell asleep in Theron's arms, feeling safer than she had in her entire life. And through the bond she felt his heart beating steady beneath her palm, felt his contentment mixing with hers, until she couldn't tell where she ended and he began. The next assassination attempt came 3 days later. Sarah woke to the smell of smoke. Theron was already moving, already reaching for his sword. Stay here, he ordered. But through the bond, Sarah felt the danger spike. The East Wing, my old rooms. Fire, Theron growled, and his eyes flashed amber. They're trying to smoke you out. If she'd been sleeping there instead of in his chambers, they would have killed you, Theron finished her thought, his jaw tight with barely controlled rage. By the time they reached the corridor, guards were already fighting the blaze. The rooms Sarah had occupied for less than a week were destroyed. Roland appeared through the smoke. It was deliberate, Your Majesty. Accelerant used. Multiple entry points. Coordinated. Find them, Theron said, his voice deadly calm. Find everyone involved. I want names by sunset. He turned to Sarah, pulling her away from the smoke. You're not leaving my chambers again. Not until this is over. Theron? No arguments. His hands framed her face. They tried to burn you alive. They knew you'd move to the East Wing. Someone is feeding them information about your movements. Until I root out every traitor in this castle, you stay where I can protect you. Through the bond, Sarah felt his fear, raw and visceral. The thought of losing her was physically painful to him. Okay, she said softly. I'll stay. It took Roland 2 days to trace the conspiracy. Lord Heron, a southern noble who'd been quietly gathering support for a coup, who saw Theron's bond with a wolfless woman as weakness, proof that the king had gone soft. He's wrong, Roland told Theron as they stood in the war room, Sarah seated nearby. You're more focused than I've seen you in years since you marked her. Theron's eyes found Sarah's across the room. Through the bond, she felt his determination. Gather the evidence, Theron said. I want charges drawn up by morning. Treason. Attempted murder. Conspiracy. His voice dropped, deadly serious. And make it public. Let everyone see what happens to those who threaten what's mine. The trial was swift. Lord Heron and his co-conspirators were stripped of titles, lands, and lives, executed publicly as traitors. And throughout it all, Sarah stood at Theron's side. Visible, undeniable, wearing his mark for all to see. The court whispered. They would always whisper. But when Theron took her hand in front of the entire assembly, when he declared her under his protection, and anyone who threatened her would answer to him personally, the whispers didn't matter anymore. That night, Theron pulled Sarah close in the privacy of their chambers. I know this isn't what you wanted, he said quietly. Being visible, being important, being mine. No, Sarah admitted, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. I wanted to stay invisible. Stay nobody. Stay safe. She met his amber eyes. But then you saved my life. Then you gave me your mark. Then you made me matter. And now I don't want to go back to being nobody. I want to be somebody. To you. You are. Theron's kiss was gentle, reverent. You're everything. Through the bond, Sarah felt the truth of his words. Felt his love, because that's what it was now, fully formed and undeniable. I love you, she whispered against his lips. I love you too, Theron said. From that first moment when you threw yourself in front of an arrow. From the moment you opened your eyes wearing my mark. Every moment since. He kissed her deeper. Stay with me. Not because of the bond. Because you choose to. I choose you, Sarah said. Every day. Always. The wolfless nobody became a queen. The artificial bond became real love. And 2 people who'd spent their lives alone, finally, found home in each other's arms. The end. Sometimes the greatest love stories start with sacrifice. Sometimes being nobody is what prepares you to be someone's everything. And sometimes the curse that nearly kills you is